Hello everyone, I am Charu and I am super excited to bring another episode of Industry Connect with you all. At Seekamentor, we tries to bridge the gap between theory and applications by bringing industry experts to share their real life experiences. Today we have Anupam with us. Anupam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Charu. Hey, folks. This is Anupam. I am working with Ather Energy as Smart Mobility Experience Product Manager. And we have a lot of fancy titles at Ather Energy for product managers because it's a fairly new industry that you're working in where you have connected devices, where you have the regular digital product that you have. So I do smart mobility experience. I manage smart mobility experiences at Ather Energy. Prior to this, I was working with financial services at Aditya Birla Group. And with respect to product, I have worked on a couple of 0 to 1 products. I have worked on products which were in the phase of scaling up, so 1 to N products. I have worked on B2B2C products, B2B products, as well as B2C products in the digital domain, as well as now I think I can classify it as that. So IoT or the connected gadgets domain. Before product management, I started out my career as a hardware design engineer. So I used to design circuits for 4 years before moving to MBA and then getting into product management.
Great, Anupam. So I couldn't have been more excited to welcome you here because you have such a great experience in the product management, and our audience would really like to hear some insights from you. So you have worked at ABG, now you're working at Ether. So, and you have worked on a lot of diverse products, right? As you mentioned, you have worked on B2B, B2C, 0 to 1 products. So it's a lot of diverse experience, right? So what is the
Right.
difference in role when you worked at ABG and now when you are working at Ether?
So one thing
What is
that is true about product management in general is it is not still as established a discipline as most of the other functions are. Like, you know what a software developer is supposed to do, very well defined, right? You know exactly what a UX designer is supposed to do. But I would say product management is where probably, let's say, UX design was 20 years back. So now UX design has these established principles that there are certain laws that you follow, and there's also art where you have to keep user in mind and keep on coming up with these creative solutions and solving that problem, right? But for product, it is at a very nascent stage, and it changes with every organization, and not just with every organization, even within the organization, depending on the kind of product you're working on or the kind of team you're working with, your role changes entirely, right? Like if you look at product managers, the non-technical product managers in Microsoft, they're called program managers, but they will be doing the product role. In some organizations, the product person is actually expected to do the project management role, right? In some organizations, the product manager could be doing a technical product manager managerial role, right? And so where do you draw the lines? Like where do you say that this was part of the product management responsibility or this was not? Is very different across different organizations. And not just that, even the stage at which the organization is or the industry in which you are, right? Like there are tech companies, Microsoft, Google, where the product management role, the processes, even Amazon, right, would be much well defined. That this is what the product is supposed to do. This is how it gets into the development pipeline. This is how it gets executed, right? But if you're in a startup, right, or if you're in a certain other industry, let's say automotive, for example, right, what is expected of a product manager would change. So you have to adapt yourself. So one of the key skills that I feel is required for a product manager is the ability to adapt themselves to whatever role or team they're working with. Certain teams might have a very high maturity and very high ownership into, let's say the product just defines that this is the problem I want to solve, and then the team takes over, right? But in certain organizations, you will have to go into depth defining like the agile development process that we have, right, where you define user stories, acceptance criteria. But in some organization, it may not just end there. You will also have to be deeply involved in the development process itself. So it changes. And even within ABG, because we did not have an in-house development team, I got to experience different flavors of these with every different product that I worked with. That is where the diversity came in. And even at Ather, we have an in-house development team, but the kind of product I'm working with is very different from what it was earlier. Like one of the major differences here is I was working on, let's say, a consumer portal in ABG, right? Then the challenges I would face could be that consumer data is stored in a different database. Let's say sales data is stored in a different database. And if I have to define a product, then I would even have to look into where these databases are and how do they interact with each other, right? The level of complexity gets a little more at Ather right now because you also have a connected device with sensors here. Something like I am building a feature called theft and tow alerts, right? So now the only way for me to understand whether that feature is working well or not is the data that I'm getting from sensors, but what if the sensors are faulty, right? So this entire process of you understanding how reliable your data is, are you collecting it at the right place, are you able to fetch and read it at the real time? Like theft and tow alerts are effective only when you give the alert to the user in real time, right? So building that entire pipeline falls onto the product manager, understanding what kind of challenges will come in, what kind of latency is expected here, what are false positives, what are false negatives, what do you do in these different scenarios, what is the ability that you should be giving the user. Like if there is a theft alert, should you be giving a user the ability to immobilize the vehicle? What if the vehicle is already in riding state, right? There is another added complexity of user interacting with your product, and the nature of product itself is such that if you change anything while the user is riding, it might just have an adverse effect, right? So that complexity defines a lot of things.
Got it, got it. So, Anupam, now you are talking a lot about the databases. I remember that data is a very crucial tool in product management, and every product manager have to
Hmm.
learn how to work with the data, how to analyze the data, right? How to understand
Right.
or how to get the valuable insights from the data. So,
Hmm.
at Ether, how do you actually use those data insights to tell your stories to
Hmm.
maybe the other stakeholders? How do you present those stories? How do you analyze those data? Can you please share some more insights on that?
Right. Thanks for that, Charu. I think one critical point that you mentioned here is actually that data is a tool, right?
Mm.
So your products, like there could be certain products which are data-defined products, which are completely hinged on data. Like the example I was giving earlier, where you're reading continuously data from the sensors and then defining what action to be taken at that, right? Those will be from the vehicle or from the connected device, right? Your decision making could be data driven, where you see something in data and then you react to it and say that if this happens, then I would want to do this, or this is how I look at it, right? But the critical point that you mentioned here was that data is a tool and not the driver, right? So
Correct.
when you look at data, your decision making, like the way we see it, is that it has to be data informed decision making and not just a data driven decision making, right? So
Correct.
everyone has that data available across the org, right? Everyone is able to see how your users are using the product. Everyone is able to see the adoption of the product, right? But what differentiates you as a product manager is the context that you add to it, the story that you're able to extract out of that data, right? So, like I'll give you an example. We This was in Aether about 2 years back. We were working on a product, and it was in beta stage, and we had made it available to certain users. But it was an opt-in product, right? So you have to explicitly go say that you want to enable this particular feature, and then you'll be able to use it. But at certain points, like we had those metrics already defined. So these metrics also for you to understand whether your product is successful or not. Like if it is a beta product, a product manager's ability to understand that probably acquisition may not be your primary metric here, while acquisition is
Correct.
important. Your
Mm.
primary metric here could be retention. That
Correct.
comes in from your understanding of the context,
Correct.
right? So we decided at that point that our usage and engagement was pretty high, our retention was pretty high. So this is the product is at a good stage to make it public. So we made it public, right? And then what happened was gradually we started seeing adoption grow by leaps and bounds. So every week, so these are not real numbers that I'm quoting, but assume that growth before making it public was, let's say, 5% every week. And now we started seeing a growth of 20% every week, right? And this was mind blowing. It was like, oh no, our product was performing so well, and we did not understand that it was doing this well. We should have probably made it live earlier. And we started celebrating across the org. Oh, this is successful, right? But because you have been closer to the user, you understand that what are the problems that you have not solved for, or what are the things that are not yet done in the product. This kind of growth, as a product manager, to me seemed inorganic. Like this cannot happen, right? While rest of the organization is celebrating, and you figure out, you know, there's something wrong with the product, right? Or even the curiosity of how to replicate it in other products. Like if this is the growth that I'm able to achieve in one product, what is that one thing that we did here, or what is the cause of that particular growth that I can probably replicate in the learnings that I can take to other products, like, right? So I need to look at data even then, right? So we started looking into it, and we were like, "Ki, probably everything was pointing towards that it could be organic growth, right? And it took a lot of time and energy and effort for all of us to sit together, figure out what could be happening, eliminating different reasons. There could be certain software reasons. We had not fundamentally changed anything in the discovery of the product. We had not fundamentally changed anything that could have driven more adoption of the product, right? So it did not seem organic at all. But then ultimately we sat down, figured out, I think it took us It took us a month to realize that this is not organic growth. It probably took us another couple of weeks to figure out, oh, this is what happened, right? And now because again the hardware complexities I was talking about, so we figured that there was something happening somewhere else because of which this happened, and it was directly linked to our sales growth, right? So you understanding that how sales is impacting, or what kind of precautions you need to change, or what kind of additional step that you would need to put in the process for you to exactly understand whether your product is performing or not, because there are so many other external factors that impact it, right? It could, let's say, even something be as simple as an influencer talking about your product, and then suddenly people start discovering your product, right? You eliminating all those channels. So it is your ability to understand the data in the correct context, your ability to understand the user, to know what where are they using, when are they using, when are they not able to use, and then defining what direction should your product be taking. Like we could have over indexed on building everything around this particular product itself, right? That the adoption is so high, let's just focus all our energies onto this, right? But then you being able to take that product direction decisions is hinged on data itself, right? So this was one example. Another example could be in terms of, let's say, user experience. So if I were just, or if we were just looking at data, and if I look at, oh, this is my weekly active user base, or this is this thing, a lot of things get lost in medians or averages, right? Then for one of the products, we actually figured there was this cohort of users who were using the product to an obscenely high number. Like you would not even believe there is somebody using this particular feature 30 times a day, right? And then if you were just looking at averages, it could have been, हाँ, ठीक है, must be an outlier. But then if you are really user focused, and if you really want to get into that problem solving for users, you would investigate, which is where this continuous process of user discovery also comes in. So we started speaking to that cohort of users just to understand. So one other thing that our team does really well is continuous discovery with users, the user research part of it. So we have an insights team which is common across the org, but as product managers, all of us actually have made it a point that we'll speak to at least 5 users every week, right? So what we discovered in that particular journey was that there was another core need or core motivation that we were solving through that particular product, which was not even our intention initially, right? Which is common across the org, but as product managers, all of us actually have made it a point that we'll speak to at least 5 users every week, right? So what we discovered in that particular journey was that there was another core need or core motivation that we were solving through that particular product, which was not even our intention initially, right? The intention was something else. It was a sub product to something else. But when we figured out there was this cohort which was using your product really highly, we started building more on that. And now that is an entire different suite of products that we're working on. So in that way, I would say that data is critical. Data helps you build conviction to your product. Data helps you get buy-in. Data helps you understand your user better, but the context of user, like data is a tool and not just the driver of all the decisions that you take.
So, Anupam, a product manager has to take all the decisions regarding the product, right? He has to interact with the stakeholders to understand why do even users need our product. So he has to get into the shoes of the customers to understand what are the pain points the users are facing, and then he
Right.
has to solve those pain points, right? And then he actually develops a vision of the product. He can take a product to any direction that he wants. So can
Yeah.
we say that like a product manager is the CEO of a product, just like a CEO handles the entire organization? Does a product manager also can be said as the CEO of a product? Like, do you relate with that analogy?
That's a very interesting and widespread point where that is how product manager careers get sold to people, right? And that is, I think, the biggest scam in product management as such. That you're told that you are the mini CEO of the product. So what it actually makes you believe is that you have all the decision making authority, you have
Correct.
all the power in the world to get the product built. But that's not actually true, right? Because the other thing that also comes up with this entire narrative of you being CEO of the product is that you have to influence without authority, right? However senior you might become in product roles, let's say you're VP of product somewhere, you're director of product somewhere, uh, your execution teams are not reporting to you, right? And which is how it should be, because you have to take care of the user, the development teams have to take care of the quality, the program teams have to take care of the time aspect of it, right? So they cannot be fundamentally reporting to you. That is established. Now, how do you influence your teams to actually work on the product for you? That is the key role of a product manager, you being the facilitator here and not necessarily the CEO. CEOs, product managers are not startup founders. product managers are facilitators in this sense, right? So I believe that is one of the biggest myths. And but the role is also similar to the role of a CEO, because you're not actually executing or delivering things like writing code as such. But what you're doing is you still have to set vision for the product. You still have to set the goals for your teams, right? You have to align them towards common product goal, that this is the fundamental problem that we're going to be solving to the user. You actually, one of your key roles is also to inspire the team to work on this particular thing, right? And not just that, even operational roles, like let's say if you know that you have to work on this particular product, let's say you have to work on data platform, or you have to work on a data science driven product, right? And you have to you figure out that the team probably does not have that capability right now, so you even influencing those decisions that we need to hire for this particular capability falls onto the shoulders of a product manager. The coordination, like at times you may not have a different program manager, so you getting into the execution roles of acting as a project manager or program manager on that particular thing. So what I would say is more accurate description of a product manager, and this might sound a little weird, could be that a product manager is an amoeba or a shapeshifter. So you just put that person anywhere and they are supposed to perform in whatever environment you put them in, right? And you take up the role of whatever is missing in the team as such, right? But the key aspect here is that you are not the primary decision maker. So one of the key skills that you need to succeed as a product manager is how do you work with the stakeholders? And it's not just an execution skill, but rather it is a core skill that you need to require to even grow in your career as a product manager. So how do you influence these stakeholders? How do you get their buy-in? How do you inspire them to build great products that your users would love, right? That is an important aspect.
You have correctly mentioned that a major big part of a product management is the stakeholder management, right? So you have to involve with a lot of stakeholders, lot of cross-functional business teams to understand their views and
Right.
get their alignment on a product, right? So
Right.
it is very difficult to influence all the stakeholders because everybody has their own views. Engineering team have their own view, UX team have their own view, the other
Right.
cross-functional business teams will have their own views, right? And when you develop a product or a feature, there's a lot of cross dependency between different teams. So
Right.
it's very important to talk to the stakeholders, influence them, but at the same time you don't have authority over them. You don't have to
Right.
be very authoritative. So it is a very challenging job, right? So I just want to understand from you, like, how do you actually, like, in your journey, since you have a very great experience, rich experience in product management, so what is your approach when you are dealing with your stakeholders?
Oh, I think you are speaking it from a lot of personal experience, Charu. It came across as a very emotional question right now.
Yeah.
So what actually happens is, let's say you are a good product manager. You've done your user research. You have exactly understood that you're going to solve this particular problem. You have done your cost benefit analysis. You know that exactly this is the impact that we're going to go there do. You have your solution ready, and you go to a room, you do a product walkthrough with the key stakeholders. You have your engineering manager there, you have your design lead there, you have your brand marketing manager there, right? And you're presenting this particular thing. How many times has it happened with you in your personal experience that the first product walkthrough that you do there gets accepted by all these stakeholders? Right? It is very
Okay.
rare,
Correct, correct.
right? So,
Yes.
so you might be a good product manager and you might be following all the best practices. The key skill that comes out here, or the key thing that you need to do here, is understand that your stakeholders are also human. Like your users are human, right? You're not building products for a machine that you define that you do ABC and the product will behave in the manner. So, in a similar way, one of the core skills is for you to understand your stakeholders, right?
Correct.
uh, and building products that make sense to that are able to inspire
Correct.
them to action also, right? So there were a few things that I discovered over this course of career in product management. One is this concept of sideshows. I learned it from my previous boss. So he used to say that you always have to have these sideshows before you go into any important meeting, right?
Okay.
So and product managers should not have any egos, is one thing I figured. Like wherever the solution comes from, live with it, be happy with it, as long as you're building a great product for the user, right? Help them solve that problem, or what kind of challenges have you incorporated that in your document? So sideshows is one of those critical things that I've learned and would always work. If you start doing this, it might take you 10 meetings before an important meeting, but your solution will be more likely to get developed there. or you would be more likely to build a greater product there. So this happens. But the thing is, now let's say you've done that. You've done your side shows, you're in that room, you do a product walkthrough, right? People are aligned, oh, yes, it is great, and all of us want to build it. But how do you actually get people to build it? One of the other critical things is, even like, again, this is where the role is similar to a role of a CEO. How do you get investors into your product? Let's say I have this great product idea. Why should the company be investing the limited time and resources that we have into this particular product idea, right? You have your impact defined, but the organization may have different priorities, right? But let's say you're saying that this will fundamentally change the way people think about vehicles, let's say, right? Let's say you're building a software defined vehicle completely. You say that next generation of vehicle. Now, I'm not saying that we're building this, but let's say you say that the next generation of vehicles cannot be just hardware change or what you see as a vehicle, but it could purely be defined by software and sensors, right? And you want people to work towards that particular dream,
Right.
right? So that ability for you to inspire people, which will help you recruit people for your team, where people would be excited, where people would take ownership, right? It's not just that you have defined this requirement. There needs to be a back button on this particular page so that user is able to go back to the contextual back screen, right? Not to that level, but rather the team themselves figuring out that to build this particular experience, this is what we need to do, and driving that ownership and driving that inspiration. You need to be able to pitch your product in a way that you have to be a constant salesperson. Like we might say that product could be defined as an operational role, but I would say it's very much a sales role where you need to continuously be selling your product to everyone in the organization, and you also need to find evangelists for your product, somebody who believes in your product so much that they will be willing to talk about it to everyone they meet, and that actually helps you build momentum in the organization that you're working on something great that keeps your teams inspired and motivated, and helps you build a great product there.
Thank you so much, Anupam. Like you have shared a lot of great insights about the user research, about the data, about how to work with your stakeholders, right? All of these are very crucial impact, very crucial aspects when you talk about product management. And it is important for every product manager to learn about these things, right? So
Right.
do you want to share any more concluding thoughts with our audience today before we wrap up
Oh,
this session?
yeah, so that's a great point, Charu, actually. So one of the things, like as a software developer, you might have learned a language. There are languages that are changing, and you continuously keep on upskilling yourself. As a product manager, it is very important for you to become an expert in what you're doing, right? And that is again a lot of hard work. Where it could be, let's say, reading books. So one of the best books that I've read, because we focus so much on the user and user experiences, right? Understanding what your user actually wants. The Mom Test is an amazing book, which helps you understand or derive better insights, better actionable insights out of every interaction you have with the user. Like I'll give you an example. Okay, sorry, I think I'm extending this interview a lot, but
No, no,
there was this
that's
amazing
fine.
example. Let's say as a smart mobility experience product person, right? I have built maps on the scooter, right? Why do you build maps on the scooter? Fundamentally, it is a much safer way for you to drive. And whenever you have to go from point A to point B, the annoying experience of you taking out your phone at every turn and trying to figure out where do I have to go, right? Annoying. But we simplify that experience and we put map. A great product manager, what they would also understand is, uh, like, and it might sound stupid when you ask this question to users. कि अच्छा आप map में you were navigating to this particular place, but how did you figure out where to go? So like, oh, what kind of a stupid question is that? My friend told me. So like, how did your friend tell you? Like getting into that nuance, right? It might sound irritating,
Yeah.
but you develop that with practice, and you start deriving these kind of insights. So even something as nuanced as uh, like, how do you start navigating? So typically, more often than not, people will tell you, "Oh, I received a location on WhatsApp," right? And uh, what we need to understand is there are named locations that you can actually search for. But most of the locations, the pins that you receive on WhatsApp are unnamed. So what happens there is you try to find out a landmark that is near that pin. You put that for navigation. Like if you have to book an Uber, that is such an annoying experience, right? So one feature that we built there was, because we know that people receive locations on WhatsApp from any app, you'll be able to share your location to the scooter directly and navigate on the scooter, right? That can only come in once you understand what pain is your user going through in that entire journey, right? So sorry, like not digressing from the point, coming back to this, Mom Test is an amazing book there. Continuous Discovery Habits by Teresa Torres, that is amazing. Like how do you automate this entire user research process? How do you derive better insights out of that is an amazing process. One of the things that I also face challenges with is because you have teams that are continuously moving around, right? Like you might be working with Techion today, and you might move to another company, and the language that you use there, right? The language that you use with your team there could be very different from the language that I use at Ether, right? So even all of you aligning on that same vocabulary of product development, right? Like, what do you mean by something as simple as what do you mean when you say beta release, right? The definition of beta release in your world could be very different from beta release in my world, right? So somehow we have figured out like these kind of things. Like there was this amazing course on digital product management fundamentals. So what we started doing in my team, and this was again at ABG, and I continued that practice here as well, was whoever joins my team, the first thing that I ask them to do is read mock test so that we can talk about users in the same way. Then go through this particular course, Digital Product Management Fundamentals by University of Virginia. It's there on Coursera. So at least you start developing a common vocabulary within the product, right? So you reading these books continuously. Build is an amazing book by Tony Fidel, which tells you actual challenges that even Apple faces when they're building products, right? And they have this entire culture of you having demos for your product even before you go to the user, right? You discovering that entire journey that when your user receives the product, how should the product feel in their hands, starting from there, right? To all this way of how do they use the product? Like even the problem that we were facing earlier, right? When we started recording this, it was like Apple is building these great experiences. My phone is always connected to MacBook, which is always connected to my AirPod, which is connected to my, and then you don't have to think about it. So when I have to join the Zoom link, I just copied it on my iPhone, and I could use it on my laptop, right? So even thinking to that extent, you start developing when you listen to these great leaders, you listen to these podcasts, you read these good books, you keep yourself updated with technology, uh, whichever domain you are in, like becoming an expert in that particular domain is yeah.
Thank you so much, Anupam, for sharing these insights. It was a great, great session today, and I couldn't be more thankful to you for this. Thank you so much for finding out your time to have this session with us. And I'm really sure that audience would have got a really great insights today. Today we will wrap up our session, but we would really like to have more sessions with you in the upcoming week. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Charu, and thanks a lot. And I think Seekamentor is doing great work here.